Today, we are diving deep into a geopolitical chess match with incredibly high stakes. It's a standoff between the US and Iran, and the chessboard itself is one of the most critical waterways in the entire world. And believe me, the outcome here could affect every single one of us.
And this quote from the US Vice President, well, it just says it all. After a truly historic meeting in Islamabad, the very first of its kind in 49 years, any hope for a breakthrough was just completely shattered. 21 hours of intense negotiation, and it all ended in a total stalemate.
So the big questions are, what on earth went wrong in that room? And maybe more importantly, what does this failure mean for global stability? And, for your wallet. Let's break it all down. Okay, first things first, let's get into why these talks fell apart. You have to understand, this wasn't just another meeting. We're talking about the first of its kind in nearly half a century, which makes the fact that it failed so spectacularly even more significant. The US Vice President put it pretty bluntly. The problem wasn't the talking points or some procedural issue. No, it was a bone-deep mistrust that's been built up over decades. One meeting, no matter how long it goes, was never going to erase nearly 50 years of open hostility. Now, a huge reason for this stalemate is the massive leverage Iran brought to the negotiating table. Let's call it their Hormuz trump card. Total control over the Strait of Hormuz. And that control is so powerful because of this one single number, 20%. Think about that. A full fifth of the entire world's crude oil and natural gas has to squeeze through this one narrow choke point. Geographically, the strait is just incredibly narrow, and that's what makes it so vital for global trade, but also what makes it extremely vulnerable. It's so narrow, in fact, that Iran can effectively control the whole thing with relatively simple military hardware. And they have a really clear four-step strategy to use this leverage. First, they lay sea mines near Oman's coast, which makes that route way too risky. This basically funnels all the ships into a channel that they control. From there, they can inspect every single vessel, and, according to some reports, they can even collect tolls, but in currencies like the Chinese yuan to get around US sanctions. This is exactly why you hear analysts calling the strait Iran's Brahmastra. That's a divine ultimate weapon from Hindu mythology, and it's actually a pretty fitting metaphor. This isn't just a shipping lane. For Iran, it's their ultimate bargaining chip on the world stage. But look, control of the strait isn't the only roadblock here, not by a long shot. The second major sticking point is a very familiar one, Iran's nuclear program. You can pretty much boil down all 21 hours of those failed talks to the massive gap between these two numbers. The US was demanding a 20-year freeze on uranium enrichment. Iran's counteroffer, just 5. That 15-year difference was a chasm that diplomacy just could not bridge. But this isn't just about the numbers, right? It's really about the history. Iranian negotiators, they look at this timeline and they remember 2018 vividly, when the US just walked away from the last deal. So from their perspective, why on earth should they trust any new long-term American promise when the last one was just torn up? And beyond the strait and the nuclear file, the talks got bogged down by a whole web of other demands and conflicts. All of this stuff reflects the broader shadow war that's being fought all across the Middle East. Iran's list of demands was, well, it was sweeping. They want an end to all primary oil sanctions. They also want an end to secondary sanctions that stop them from buying equipment from other countries. And on top of all that, they want a U.S. guarantee for the safety of their regional allies and a total withdrawal of all American forces from the region. And this, right here, is where things just completely break down. Iran calls groups like Hezbollah and Hamas resistance fighters. The U.S. officially designates them as terrorist organizations. With such a fundamental disagreement on what to even call these groups, a deal on regional security is pretty much impossible. So a diplomatic stalemate in Islamabad. Why should the rest of the world care? Well, because any disruption in the Strait of Hormuz creates an immediate bottleneck for the entire global economy. This gives you a quick snapshot of what's at stake. A blockade of the strait doesn't just choke off oil and gas. It also stops massive amounts of fertilizers, which are essential for global food production, and petrochemicals that are used in countless products we use every day. And the ripple effects would be felt everywhere. We're talking higher prices at the gas pump, more expensive food at the grocery store, and potential shortages of everything from plastic bottles and packaging to critical car parts. So, with the talks dead in the water and a fragile ceasefire literally ticking down, the big question is, where does this conflict go from here?
We know that some back-channel communications are still happening, but there's a new and very powerful player that has just decided to step onto the board. That player is China, a country that usually maintains what it calls strategic silence on foreign conflicts. Suddenly, they've decided to get involved. So why now? What's China's angle here? Well, it all comes down to this one core strategic fear. China is already confronting American military power in the Pacific. The absolute last thing it wants is a pro-US government in Iran, which would create a second American military front right on its western border. Beijing is terrified of being caught in a two-pronged war.
And so that leaves us right here, in this incredibly precarious moment. A temporary ceasefire is just about to expire. The blockade on one of the world's most important waterways is still in place, and the entire world is watching, basically holding its breath.
So it all comes down to this. Is the Strait of Hormuz just a powerful bargaining chip in a larger game, or is it about to become the world's next major flashpoint? For now, the outcome of this high-stakes gambit is anyone's guess.